TalkingSense listeners and viewers, Latney Conant coming to you with an absolutely amazing episode. Think about how Ed Sheeran is to pop or Pink is to pop. We've got Matt Dixon here to B2B marketing and selling. So for those of you who don't know Matt Dixon, we're going to blow your minds in the next kind of 45 minutes or so. He is the author of the best-selling book, Challenge Your Sale. Unless you've been under a rock in the land of B2B, you've probably heard of, read, seen presentations on Challenge Your Sale. But guess what? That was a while ago. And Matt has been very busy. He's been at it again. And he's got a new book that's hot off some new research called The Jolt Effect. And you're going to want to read this. You're going to want to check out the book. And you're going to want to check out his research company, which is, let me make sure I get this right, DCI Insights. Is that right, Matt?
DCM Insights, yeah.
DCM Insights. So check out all of the above right after this episode. So Matt, welcome. Love having you.
Great. It's great to be here. Thank you for the invite.
In the presence of greatness. So I want to kick it off by, for a lot of us, Challenger kind of blew our minds. So why do we need to read a new book? What's changed?
It's funny because one of the things that Brent Adamson, who I co-wrote Challenger and Challenger Customer with, that we often joke about is that, as researchers, I think you find answers out there in the data, and some of those answers are really interesting. But what ends up happening is it raises more questions. So I think one of the things that we've always been on kind of the lookout for, what's next in sales. As you know, Challenger's a story about how do we avoid being boxed out and forced to compete on price by that customer who's learning on their own. You remember the finding from that research that customers are like 60% through their buying journey or their learning journey before they ever engage with us. And it puts the salesperson.
That's the whole reason the company that I work for exists.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Thank you for that stat.
You got it. You got it. And look, and it's a really big problem, and it's a problem that's getting worse. It's not going away anytime soon. That was something we wrote about more than a decade ago in the Challenger Sale. Then, the next problem we uncovered, we thought, okay, we're good. Like that was our contribution to sales and to marketing. And then, we got questions from our customers who said, it's interesting. Challenger is it's effectively a story of how do I engage that one customer and change their mind and reframe their thinking and get them to see us differently, but more importantly, see themselves differently, see their own needs differently. But did you guys ever think about what happens from that point forward? Because selling in B2B is a lot more complicated than just convincing one person. You've got to get the whole buying committee on board. And that problem is getting a lot worse too. So we wrote a second book called The Challenger Customer. We explored this idea of mobilizers and how do challengers actually traverse the rest of that buying journey, because it's really hard going from one person who's got to then get all their dysfunctional colleagues and buying committee members together to agree on what could be a big undertaking, a transformative purchase for their company. So we wrote that book. That was in 2015. We published that. And then
what was the big stat from that one? How many people on a typical buy?
Yeah, great question. So the stat, I often don't mention it because it was out of date as soon as we wrote the book. The stat was we found there were on average 5.4 stakeholders who weigh in on a complex purchase, which I think today people kind of laugh at and say, well, I got 5.4 committees, each with 5.4 people on them.
I always wonder about that 0.4.
Yeah.
Like an intern?
It could be an intern. It could be an intern. Maybe it's bring your child to work day. I don't know.
Yeah,
Something like that. Right.
But I got to say, that's another stat that we've taken to the bank.
Sure.
And for those of you listening, if you're not doing account-based marketing, you're in the account-based game, whether you're trying or not. Matt and Brent and the Challenger customer team proved that. So either put the uniform on and play or You just are out there in the field running
You go
around
find
because,
a different game. Yeah,
yeah, because you know what? It's
that's
going
well
to be a
said.
lot of people on a buying team.
Yeah, it's well said. After we wrote the book, we reran the data, and the number was 6.8. So the book was like out of date almost immediately. And then my former colleagues, many of whom are still at Gardner Group, studying this. I think the last run of that data had the average buying group size in like the low teens. And so this number is continuing to go up. And I would argue, Zoom is like the particle accelerator of buying committee growth, because there's no downside to sending the demo link or the meeting invite to like everybody in the organization. Like, why not? Why not get as many eyes as possible on this solution and on this vendor, and get a lot of opinions about what we should do. That just makes life really hard for the salesperson, of course. So then, fast forward to the past couple of years. One of the problems, the new problems we'd been kind of tracking, was this. What we sensed was an increase in no decision losses. The A higher and higher percentage of customers who will go through an entire purchase process, which in the case of your company, the case of many tech companies selling complex solutions, that can be months of time that the customer sinks into evaluating your solution, running a pilot, a POC, kicking the tires, talking to reference customers,
Yeah.
doing like a gazillion demos, talking to your product people, your engineers, your subject matter experts, your CS people, you name it. And then,
See
not
more,
to say,
want more. See more,
yeah,
want
yeah,
more.
totally. It's like, and they consume so much. They spend a lot of their own time.
Yeah.
They consume a lot of our time, as sales and marketing, and then they end up ghosting us and disengaging and going radio silent. And it's like, what would possess somebody to do that to themselves, let alone do it to another person, and just end up doing nothing? And more importantly, what do the best salespeople do to avoid that? Now, this was a problem that we've been kind of tracking anecdotally, and then we started measuring it, and we wanted to study it in some detail. And then something, at least for researchers, something kind of transformative happened in the world of sales
You wrote
research,
that.
which is,
Yeah. That was the
yeah,
preface.
exactly. March of 2020. We all remember this. Like, you and I were learning to bake sourdough bread, and we were watching Tiger King, and it's like the good times of the lockdown, right? But because I'm a total research nerd, I was like, holy cow, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, because sales has gone 100% virtual overnight, and that means that every sales interaction, not just the mundane ones, but all of them, were on Zoom.
So much data.
Yeah, so we could collect all this stuff. So we actually recruited a group of several dozen companies across industry, global sample, and over about 18 months, 18 24 months, they sent us roughly 2.5 million sales calls. So we took all those calls, we transcribed them, and then we used a machine learning platform from a company called Tether, where my co-author and I, Ted McKenna, were working at the time. And we used that platform to study this data at scale, and we pointed it toward, why do people make no decision? What possesses people to do that? What motivates them to do such a thing? And then what do the best salespeople do to avoid that happening to them? And what we found, like Challenger Customer, was really pretty surprising, and kind of, in many respects, I think flies in the face of a lot of the conventional wisdom out there.
So, a couple things. Track competitive and non-competitive win rates if you're
Mm-hmm.
not, as a marketing leader or sales leader. I always find it really, really interesting to look at. And just another tip kind of on what we were just talking about is like, go back and look at all your won deals and what were the winning patterns, how many people were involved. We joked about the 5.4 or 7.2. You should know what that is for, like, I know for
Sure.
me right now it's 13.
Yeah.
That's up, 50% from three
Yep.
quarters ago.
Yep.
So I know that your new research to some
Mm-hmm.
degree flies in the face of what you've already taught us, but
Mm-hmm.
I still think so much of what you've already taught us is valuable. But talk to me about the overcoming status quo and
Mm-hmm.
how, like, is that the true enemy?
Yeah,
Is
a great
status
question.
quo, or because that's what, when people hear no decision, they thought, oh, there wasn't enough pain.
That's right.
We didn't establish enough pain. We
Yep.
didn't tie it to value drivers. We
Yep.
should have had a stronger business case. If we just
Yep.
had one more calculator we showed them, or we got the CFO to see the calculator that we built. We would have
Yeah.
been fine. But I'm
Yeah.
not sure that's what you found.
No, it isn't. Actually, it's interesting. I think one of the things I would say is that in some ways, no, no pun intended, but in some ways the new book kind of challenges some of the things we actually found in the earlier research. But I think when we reflect back on it, what we took away was it's not do this instead of Challenger, it's do this in addition to Challenger. Because I think the reality is in B2B sales, and this came out in our data too, we lose to the status quo all the time. The status quo is a very powerful enemy. We've known that for a very long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Customers, they'll pass up on great opportunities sitting right in front of them that they know deep down they should pursue. They'll pass up on it just because they don't want to change. Getting people to change is hard. That's true of people in general. It's true of business customers. And the status quo has a powerful gravitational pull on the customer. So it takes a lot to motivate them to move forward. So the message I would give everyone is don't stop doing that. And I would argue that challenger customer are I'm biased, but I think it's the best kind of state of the art research backed approach for doing that. But what we found in this new research is it's not enough, in that assuming that a customer who's starting to get cold feet, starting to hesitate, starting to ghost you, starting to disengage, that you haven't beaten the status quo, and going back and then hammering the status quo can be a recipe for disaster. So what we actually found, just to back up, you were asking about those findings, the 57% of buying journey completed before you reach out to the salesperson, the 5.4 stakeholders. This one was 40 to 60% of the average salesperson's pipeline lost to no decision. Now, when the way
40
this
to
unfolds,
60.
40 to 60, and it depends on the type of sale. So we found the reason for the range: 40% is more typical of true high dollar value, complex, long sales cycle, like complex solution sales. 60%, though, if it's a more transactional sale, it could be as high as 60%. And the reason I think is obvious, that customers don't waste as much of their time or your time kicking the tires if it's going to consume a lot of their time to go through the purchase journey. So they're a little bit more thoughtful before they do it, but still 40% whether it's 40, 50, 60, that's a huge dead weight loss for the average salesperson, the average sales organization, to have that many deals where you've spent months and months of time, countless hours of salesperson time, subject matter expert time, executive sponsor time, pursuing opportunities that go nowhere.
But
Now,
even think about earlier. I mean,
mm-hmm.
there's like, you have to start beating status quo from the second they
Absolutely.
come to your website,
Yeah.
from the second they get an outbound message from, so you could take pipeline to close and call it 40 to 60, but I would say
Mm-hmm.
it's probably bigger to that when you look at like just interactions. Like how many people
Oh,
are
for
just like,
sure.
oh,
Yeah,
this doesn't seem good, I'm out, or it doesn't
for
seem
sure.
relevant.
Yeah, that would be people who actually end up as kind of sales qualified leads in the pipeline, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're right. The number's probably a lot bigger than that. But what's interesting is if you look at, because again, you mentioned this before, when we lose deals, or when the customer ghosts us or they disengage, and we end up marketing it as close loss, no decision in the CRM system, and we do the retrospective, I think the assumption is we failed. It's all those things you talked about. We did not, either the customer believes what they're doing today is good enough.
We
We
got to
haven't
do
connected
more value training.
more value training. We got to sharpen that ROI. We
The
need better
message.
reference, the
Yeah.
messaging. We need better reference stories. We need to create that burning platform, dial up the FUD, get them to realize the cost of their inaction. Or, we found in our analysis is, that it's usually the salesperson. We found three different techniques. The first one is kind of positive. It's hey, Lightning, you must have missed like how great our platform. Let's get back in the demo environment. Let me show you again how amazing things are going to be if you simply said yes and bought our solution, and really try to connect the dots on value. Like you clearly must not get how amazing this is going to be for you. So that's the carrot approach. The stick approach is FUD, right? It's like, I'm going to make you squirm by pointing out that
Every
these
day
problems.
you're losing
That's
this
right.
much dollars. Your competitors are
Yep.
doing this. You're probably going to
We
get
work,
fired.
we
Meh.
work with all your competitors and they're doing great, and you're going to be
Yeah.
stuck with this terrible, crappy
Yeah.
status quo, and then if those two techniques fail, usually what most salespeople go to is like the 10% discount that's only good this quarter. It's like the disappearing carrot
Okay.
act,
So
right?
Matt, I literally just got off a call Same situation.
Mm-hmm.
And this has happened 2 quarters in a row.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we went through all that stuff. And then we
Yep.
talked about, we're going to support you. We're going to make it easy. This is our customer support team, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So what do we do?
Yeah.
What do
Well,
we do right now? Do we just give up?
no, definitely don't give up. That's
How do we jolt them?
yeah. So
Tell me
let
what
me,
to do.
I'll tell you about that. Well, let me first tell you that what we found is, so all that stuff we just talked about, if I were to categorize it, I would say it's these are all FOMO tactics, right? You're going to miss out on the magic of our solution if you don't say yes. You're going to, on the upside, right? The value. You're going to miss out on fixing this terrible problem in your business, the burning platform, or you're just going to miss out on the discount that I'm offering you now that's not good next quarter. Those are all FOMO based tactics. And what we found is that for a customer who's already convinced that this is a problem worth solving, that you are the partner to work with, and they have stated their intent to move forward, and then they get cold feet, trying to dial up the FOMO, actually, it's not just that it doesn't work, it actually makes things worse. Because your customer is actually not worried about missing out. What they're worried about is messing up. So we talk about the difference between FOMO and FOMO, the fear of messing up. And it turns out when you look at the social science, I wouldn't wish this on any of your listeners, but we consumed like 30 or 40 years of behavioral economics and human psychology research to try to understand why does fear of failure weigh so heavily on our customers. And what we found is that, again, the social science is very clear on this. We know our customers hate to experience loss, but there's two types of loss out there that customers think about. The one is called an error of omission. That's when the customer experiences a loss by not taking action. They experience a loss through their inaction. They do nothing. They lose out on an opportunity to get a discount or fix their terrible status quo or realize all the upside gains they could have if they bought your platform. The other is an error of commission. An error of commission is very different. This is when you experience a loss that is directly attributable to a decision you made or an action you took. So imagine the customer says yes to your solution and it totally goes sideways and it's a colossal fail. That is an error of commission. Now, when you look at those two in the human mind, errors of commission are much more powerful for people, not just customers, for human beings. We are okay with missing out on golden opportunities and failing to do things that are right and would be good for us. We are not okay with making wrong decisions and doing something that we're personally responsible for. We're not okay with messing up. So FOMO, way more powerful than FOMO. So now hopefully it's clear that, look, if you have a customer who's convinced to move forward and you're just trying to dial up the FOMO, what you're really doing is using scare tactics to sell to somebody who's already afraid. But they're not afraid of what you think they're afraid of. They're afraid of messing up. They're afraid, and it turns out there's 3 specific things they're worried about. In the data we found, the first thing is they are worried that they're picking the wrong thing. And what I mean is, even if they know they want to work with you, they think about all the various options, the integrations, the different versions of our solution, the professional services or not, different contract lengths. They could roll it out in a narrow way or roll it out enterprise wide, right? There's so many different ways to buy a solution from a vendor. They're worried that I might go with option B, but what if it's option A that would have been the better option? And we realize that after we sign the contract, now we're stuck with this for 3 years. And now I've got egg on my face because I didn't do enough due diligence to pick the right solution. The second one is I haven't done enough research. So I feel like, I'm worried that I'm going to be surprised after the purchase that there was some unknown thing about your platform that had we just done another reference call, had just done another demo, had just read another Gartner Magic Quadrant report, I would have realized all the stuff I need to know to be a smart consumer. And instead, we bought the solution, and now we realize it doesn't do X, Y, or Z, and we thought it did. And now I've got egg on my face for that fail. And then the third one we call outcome uncertainty. This is where the customer is worried that they're not going to get the benefits that you're projecting. So they may not blame you. They probably blame themselves. Like, letting you
Or
don't
their
understand.
organization.
Yeah, we
We
screw this
weren't
stuff up
ready.
all the time. We weren't ready. We didn't resource it. I've seen this movie 1,000 times. We are not capable of that kind of success. We are super inconfident, and that's what they're worried about. And what they're, if you get down to it, what they're really worried about is the assumptions they use to build their business case to lobby for the purchase. If they don't attain those, that's not just a bad look. This is an environment we're in right now where people could lose their job. So if I were to sum up, it's like, at the end of the day, as one head of software sales told me, she said the same thing you did, which is I did a presentation in San Francisco a few months ago, and she came up to me afterwards. She said, I was just on a call where we did that. We tried to dial up the Fomo. We did exactly what you said not to do, and it didn't work. And then she
Yeah.
said, now I suddenly realized, oh my goodness, the customer cares a lot less about our 10% discount than they care about losing their job. That
Yeah.
weighs much more heavily on them, or just looking bad to their colleagues and their boss. And so what we need is a playbook for dialing down the FOMO. And the message, I think, again, is look, you've got to break the status quo bias. You've got to give the customer reason to change. You should use challenger and challenger customer techniques to do that. We lose all the time to the status quo, but it's not enough, because once the customers stops obsessing about whether this is a problem we're solving, whether their status quo is good enough, whether you're the vendor to work with, whether this is the right time, all that stuff, once that recedes from their mind, what they start worrying about is different stuff. Have I configured this proposal the right way? Have I done enough research? Do I know where all the bodies are buried and all the pitfalls are? And do I have any assurance from this vendor that I'm going to get what I'm paying for, or am I going to look like a fool? And so that's what they really start worrying about. So we need a playbook for instilling that confidence that they made a great decision. They've done plenty of research. Like they left no stone unturned. Even better yet, they're working with a salesperson who can help with that. And they've got a safety net here. We're not going to leave them holding the bag. They will look like a hero, not like a fool. In the playbook, we call the Jolt playbook for doing that.
Okay.
So now I can tell you about the Jolt playbook.
Now you can tell me what to do. But before we do that, a couple things. Mm-hmm. Is FOMO versus FOMO rational? Because I think sometimes we assume that people behave rationally.
No, it is, as I'll steal from Dan Ariely, the famous behavioral economist. It is irrational, but it is predictably irrational. So as the title of his book goes, right? So it makes no sense whatsoever. That if we were rational, we would look at your solution. I would look at your solution. I would say, this is going to make our company money. It's going to save us money. It's going to mitigate risk. It's going to help us engage our employees or our customers in new and different ways. Rationally speaking, it's a no-brainer.
So sales and B2B sales and marketers out there, never assume that people are rational.
Yeah. And so by predictably irrational, it is an emotional thing, right? This fear of failure is actually quite emotional. And it's so interesting because when you measure in the conversational analytics that we did, deals lost due to fear of messing up, this fear of failure, they are just like laden with emotion. I mean, there's fear, there's confusion, there's hesitation, there's frustration, there's skepticism. It's like all this stuff. It's like that you can almost hear the hand wringing that's happening.
So do we just come right out and say
it's going to be okay?
No, do we say, let's talk about what you're nervous about?
So you hit on, so we're heading down this path. So JOLT is an acronym. It stands for 4 behaviors we found in the research, and you just articulated the first one, actually. So JOLT stands for judge the level of indecision, offer your recommendation, limit the exploration, and then take risk off the table. I like it because it's memorable, but it speaks to what's happening, right?
Okay, let's repeat, because JOLT is
judge the level of indecision.
Okay.
Offer your recommendation, limit the exploration, and then take risk off the table. And the first one, the J, judge the level of indecision, you nailed it. So it's so interesting. When we look at sales conversations, if you went out and asked your customers, and that you engage with all the time, if they think they're decisive people, 100% of them will say yes. Everybody likes to think they're very decisive. What we found in the data is that 90% of the opportunities studied, 87% to be precise, 87% of the opportunities we studied had customers displaying either moderate or high levels of indecision. So decisive customers are the exception, not the rule. There is no disqualifying your way out of this problem.
What are things that my spidey senses should be going crazy
totally
to judge that they're just, this isn't about, it's like when someone breaks up with you. It's not you, it's me.
Yeah, that's right. Turns out it usually is. Like, this is like, it does, you bring this up, it reminds me of my dating life, where like the relationship was over. Yeah, it was over 3 months ago. I just didn't pick up on the hints, Anyway, but you're right. So we've got to tune, there's 2 things we got to do. The first one, something we're all familiar with in sales, but we've got to dial in our active listening so we are picking up on the signs of customer indecision. And here's the thing about indecision: it is a lot of the things that customers will say are actually sound like good things. So I'll give you an example. When I'm asking you for more content, can you send me that white paper? Lightning, I want to wait till next month's webinar. I got to be on that one. Can I do another reference call? Can we do one more demo? How about another POC in another part of the business? And the average salesperson thinks, this is awesome. That's a customer making progress towards a
They're
decision.
engaged.
But it's happy years, right? Is old saying in sales. And high performers know that is masking a customer who is worried about not consuming enough information and being left holding the bag, or being surprised in a bad way because they didn't do enough research. So that is a source of indecision. But for the average salesperson, it feels great, right? And it's really awesome, because when I have that one-on-one with my manager, I can tell that person, oh, don't worry, like, we're making progress. I got another reference call set up for that customer, or they're going to join us for our conference, or they're dialing into the webinar next month. And you're like, they're engaged, they're making progress, but high performers know that that's not what's happening. So the first thing is active listening. We've got to listen for the signs of indecision. We talk more about that in the book. But the second technique is one that we were pretty surprised to find. It's called pings and echoes. So what the way I describe this, think about for a moment, think about submarine warfare, which I know is a little bit of a weird metaphor to use in sales, but
No,
you
Sandler, the Sandler submarine. We
the
all know
submarine.
that.
All right, so here you go. So as a salesperson, you are captaining a surface ship, right? You're on the surface of the ship. Customer indecision is the submarine waiting to torpedo your deal. And you've got to find this thing that is underneath the waterline. You can't find it. And the reason it doesn't come up and say, hey, I'm over here, is because customers don't talk about indecision, because indecision is embarrassing.
It
It's
makes
a
them feel
personal,
weak.
makes them feel weak, and nobody wants to show weakness, especially not to a salesperson who I don't really know. This is not like my partner, it's not my family, it's not my friends, and so I'm not going to admit weakness in front of this salesperson, especially when we're about to negotiate and get into
Right.
hardcore business conversations. So how do I make it okay? How do I detect whether that indecision's out there, how big it is, if it's going to present a risk to us? But more importantly, how do we make it okay to talk about it? So the technique we found that high performers use is very much the same technique a surface ship uses to detect a submarine. They will use something called active sonar, which is literally sending a ping into the water, like a sound, right? And
Yeah.
what they're listening for is the reflection back from that object, which tells them, is it a submarine? Is it a whale? Is it a rock formation? And if it is a submarine, is it heading towards me? Does it present any risk? Is it an enemy submarine, right? So a ping in sales sounds like this. It could be, Lightning, we've been talking for 6 months. I'm just picking up here. And by the way, every customer at this point in the sales process starts to worry about this. We put a lot in front of you, and I'm getting the sense that maybe you guys are a little bit uncertain about what should be in the proposal and what should be out, because you can't buy everything we put in front of you. You got to start somewhere, right? But you don't want to make the wrong decision. That is totally normal. Everybody worries about that. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but help me out here. Are you guys sweating a little bit this decision about what should be in the initial rollout, our initial rollout together? And what that does is it gets you to either say, yeah, actually, to be honest, like, everything you put in front of us looks great, but we can't eat everything at the buffet. Like, we have limited budget and bandwidth. Like, we got to make some hard decisions, and we don't want to make the wrong one. And all this stuff looks great. So how do I decide? Or it might get you to say, no. Like, we're good. We know what should be in the solution. You know what we're worried about? We think our organization is incapable of achieving that 10x ROI you projected. And if we can't get that, like, it's going to be a bad time with me in the CFO's office having to explain myself in a year. So it gets us to sense and respond. And that's important for sales, because it tells us, how are we going to get this person ultimately across the line? What playbook would we need to run? Two, how do we forecast this opportunity? How far gone is this opportunity? How likely is it we're going to get them over the line? And then lastly, in extreme situations, is this even worth pursuing, or should we disqualify the opportunity, put it on the back burner, put them in a drip campaign,
So for
go fight
leaders
another
out there
another battle?
listening, what we should be doing is thinking about what are pings,
Yeah,
because we know the patterns, right?
that's right.
We should know our personas, and almost by persona, you could probably start to think about what's a good ping.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. And you should be thinking about those. They should be mapped to what are typically the sources of hesitation, confusion, cold feet that we encounter. A lot of people. I was talking to a software company earlier today, and they said one of the big ones they wrestle with is that customers are worried, especially in today's environment, about overbuying. I bought too many seat licenses. Maybe we should just start it smaller. And nobody wants to be on the hook for like, I bought 1,000 seat licenses and only 100 of them got used. And now I got to go explain to the CFO why we wasted so much company money in a really tight budgetary environment on unused software, right? Think about like the sprawl in the sales tech stack, for instance, and like everyone is really worried about getting maximum value out of their investments. And so, if for every company, it's going to vary. Some companies, you think
And
about
it
like
might
startups.
depend on like their last.
It does. It totally does. And it may not have anything to do with you, actually. They
Right.
bring baggage. They bring baggage from their prior experiences, right? Where
Yeah.
they've been burned before, and it's not that they don't trust you. It's not that they don't believe that they're heading down a better path, but they carry the baggage of all those failures in the past. And it's so important for us in sales to try to find them and get them on the table so we can deal with them and make it okay for the customer to talk about it. This is not embarrassing. Everyone struggles with
Right.
this. Totally normal, in fact. I'd be surprised if you weren't struggling with this.
Right. Okay. So we've gotten through the J.
Yep.
We're actively pinging.
Yep.
There is a submarine on our hands here.
Yep. So
how do we neutralize the torpedoes?
Yeah, so that's really, you're right. That's the OLT. Again, think about those sources of indecision we found. I don't know if I configured this the right way, if I made the right decisions about what we're buying. I don't know if I've done enough due diligence and research, and I don't know if there's an assurance of success. Does this vendor have my back? Or am I going to be left holding the bag? So the OLT really speak to those. So the first one deals with this problem, offer the recommendation, deals with this problem of the customer being overwhelmed with choice. And there's a lot of research from Barry Schwartz and others around the paradox of choice. And choice is a really double-edged sword,
Is
right?
this the jelly experiment?
The jelly experiment. Yeah. Yeah. Do you want me to talk? I don't know. It feels like the more people I talk to, the more people have heard of the jelly experiment, but I'm happy to tell it if you'd like.
Basically, grocery store, two or three jars of jelly, sales are great. 50 jars of jelly, nobody buys jelly. Too many choices, I'm out.
Yeah. Everyone tries it, but nobody buys it. And that's the thing. So think about every vendor out there they just love letting 1,000 flowers bloom. They like doing it on the trade show floor. They like doing it on their website. They like doing it in those initial sales calls. We have this integration, look at our partner ecosystem. Look at our roadmap. Look at all the different, oh my God, it's like, yes, we can do this. And then the customer starts to look at like 1,000 options and they're like, these all look great, but I can't really tell the difference between them. And I don't want to choose option A when option B would have been the better one, because then that's on me, right? That's an error of commission, and they're worried about that. So the recipe, now let's first say what most salespeople do in that situation is they go back to their diagnosis. So Ladney, rather than me telling you what I would do, what I'm going to do is ask you more questions. Well, let's go back. Let's go back to first principles. Why did you reach out to us? What business problem are you trying to solve? Let's get like, centered on that.
Tell me what to do, or you know. So I think this is a challenge that. And I'm sure your research, even with Challenger, this was like the expectations of a salesperson.
Yeah.
And like we took your Challenger customer, and our sales training is called sense making. We're also Sixth Sense, so sense making.
That works, yeah.
It works for us. But that's our whole thing. And we talk about you've got to be prescriptive. You've got to deconflict information, blah, 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 blah. But at the same time, it's like, okay, we just hired this person. Is it going to take them 3 years to ramp because they have to be a McKinsey level consultant as well as like know the Sixth Sense platform? I mean, it's a lot.
It is a lot. And I would say there's a short term and a long term on all this stuff. And by the way, the L, limiting the exploration, this effect is even more pronounced for newer salespeople. I think the L is actually the hardest one to pull off for a new salesperson. But what I always tell salespeople is, yes, you want to have a development plan to become an expert on your product and on your platform, to be able to answer those questions on your own, demonstrate that expertise. That's not going to happen overnight. But what you also need to remember is your source of authority. And I guarantee you, even a week in on the job, you're going to talk to more customers like that customer than that customer is going to talk to in a year. So you have a perspective you can bring, even if it's not your personal expertise, it's the perspective of other customers like this customer you're talking to. Right?
I think this is so important. I think that confidence, like we have to build the frontline teams confidence in
Yeah.
themselves. Like,
Yeah.
because a lot of times I get brought into deals to talk to CMOs because people think that I'm the only one who can talk to a CMO. And,
Yep.
and I'm like, you know more about this than I do. You've talked to 17 customers. So I think that
Yeah.
reinforcing of their own, like how
It's
ready they are, is so important.
on that. What I would tell you is here's a good shorthand for the O, right? Making recommendations. So which is part of this, right? That's about what to buy. The L deals more with that, some of that sense making stuff and the overwhelming amount of information and make deconflicting information, but more specifically like stopping with all the endless consumption and trying to be an expert, because the customer never will be an expert. Um, but the O, what I would tell you is the mental model to think about for a salesperson is, think about you're going to dinner with your friends and you go to a restaurant you've never been to before and you open up the menu and everything looks great. And the waiter or waitress comes by your table and you ask that person, what do they recommend? What's good here? And they say, what are you in the mood to eat tonight? That's what most salespeople do. And it is super annoying and unhelpful to foist
Or
it
I
back on
don't
the
eat
customer.
here. Let me get
Yeah,
someone who does.
I know.
Okay.
There you go. Well, there you go. I don't know. I just started here. Like I have no idea.
Yeah.
But you know what? The best. We've all been this experience. Had this experience. Both that bad experience. We've also had the opposite, which is when that person says, this is my favorite dish. This one. But if you're in the mood for something lighter, I also like this one. But I got to be honest with you. Everything we make here is wonderful. You really can't go wrong. That now, what happens in that moment is something called the delegation effect. Because what I as a consumer, and this is true in B2B purchasing too, when you make a recommendation to me, part of the blame of a bad choice is now sticking to you, not just to me, right? Because if I order that dish and I don't like it, the one the waiter or waitress recommended, it's not
Their
all my fault.
ravioli
They
was
told me to get
horrendous.
it. Yeah. But they told me it was great, So it's not all on me. And that's what we have to do. So we found quite literally, high performers will go from a lot of choices to a small consideration set. They'll immediately say, you shouldn't be thinking about this. You shouldn't be thinking about that. Even stuff we buy that might make me more money on commission, you don't need to be considering that. Here's the choice set. It's a narrower choice set. It's not 100 things. It's 3 things. And I recommend this one. But by the way, you can't go wrong with the other 2 either. But if I were you, I'd go with this one. You know why? Other customers just like you get tremendous. We get like love letters back from those customers. They love this configuration. They never look back. And I think you're going to be thrilled with it as well. That level of confidence, right, to your point, we've got to instill it in our salespeople. But that's what our customers are looking for. They don't buy this stuff all the time. And they're
Mm-hmm.
looking for us to not be like a bartender, just pour another drink and be a shoulder to cry on. They want us to be a personal trainer. Like, tell them what they should go do. Instill
Mm-hmm.
that confidence that they're making a great decision.
Mm-hmm. So how do you take the risk away?
Well, let me before we do that, let's just say, just a quick thing about the L, because you hit on something here around this idea of information consumption, and deconflicting information and sense making and all this stuff. Look,
Oh, I know when I was going to ask Matt, is there a time where you're like, because we do learn in sales just to say no. Sorry, no
yeah,
more demos, no more.
you can, and we actually found this in the analysis, but it requires some steps before you do that. So let me explain. So what we found is in almost every call we studied, and these are multiple calls over like entire sales process, there is a fork in the road moment at which the customer knows enough to make a decision but pushes for more. And that is true of the vast majority of customers. They will continue. You know what? I want to talk to one more reference customer. Can we do one more demo? Just one more. I know it's with the same group, but just slow it down. Let them ask some more questions. Like,
Mm-hmm.
can we do another POC just in this other part of the business? I know this one was awesome, but just want to make sure it works over here. And it's just like, and the salesperson's like, oh my God, like, please, like, this is enough. Now, what happens is average performers, we talked about this before, they see this as a sign of progress. They say yes. And what we find is when you feed the beast and when you never say no, the customer, you're feeding analysis paralysis. Win rates are
Making it
really, really low.
worse.
You're making it worse. What high performers do is they say no, or they don't come out and say no. They do there are a couple of initial steps, then they say no. So the first thing they understand is, if you show up and as a customer, and we've never done business together before, but you've been burned in the past by by salespeople. Like for your entire career, they've overpromised, underdelivered. They confuse the present and future tense in describing what their product can do. And you have that baggage you're bringing to the table. My default posture as a customer is not to trust you. So I believe that your job is to oversell me because you are paid to oversell me. If I want more, you're going to say yes. If I want to add the platinum bells and what, you're going to say yes. You're not going to introduce me to customers who hate you. You're going to put me on the phone with customers who love you. We all know that. And so what best performers do is they establish a basis of trust right up front. I know that's an overused term in sales, but let me tell you specifically what they do, which is they will tell the customer stuff they shouldn't buy. Like, I know you want the premium version of our platform. I don't think you guys need that. I would save your money, go take your team out for dinner, take them on a nice trip, buy the basic version. It's fine for your needs. I know you want to roll this out enterprise wide, but I actually think starting small, getting some wins on the board, and then expanding from there is going to put less pressure on you and it's going to actually lead to more success over time. Or, you know what? We found this, believe it or not, in certain extreme cases, me saying, you know what? We would love to do business with you. Nothing I'd like more than to add your logo to our logo sheet. But based on what you're looking for, that's not our strength. I would actually recommend that company over there. I can introduce you to them if you'd like. Those moments show your customer that your job is not to burn them and oversell them.
Or
Your
I
job is to
don't
get them to
think
a great
I
decision.
agree. I don't think your team's ready. We should talk to partners. Or
Absolutely, absolutely. Those are great trust building moments, and it's not this fuzzy notional feel good thing. It literally happens in very specific moments where you tell the customer something that actually kind of surprises them because they expected the exact opposite from you as a salesperson. The second thing you got to do, and this goes to a comment you made before, is you have to demonstrate your expertise. And what that means is if you are talking to a CMO, what you do not do is call Latney and say, hey, I brought Latney. She knows marketing. Latney, take it away. You know why? Because you are not the salesperson. I am. And in that moment, something really disastrous happens to me as a salesperson, which is I get delegated down to the person I sound like. And if I sound only like a person whose only value is to get you on the phone because you're really the smart person, then what value am I bringing to the customer? Now, that's a recipe for a customer who will continue to do their own research, endless research, because they see me as a person who doesn't know a heck of a lot more about this than they do. It's a little bit like if I were to plan a trip to Italy, would you ever do business with a travel advisor who'd never been there either, had never planned a trip for anybody? That's a recipe for spending a lot of time on TripAdvisor and with guidebooks, probably more about finding a new travel advisor. But nevertheless, like that is an information asymmetry. And you're like, I got to do my own research because this person is in no position to guide me. So we've got to demonstrate our expertise. And if we get down to it, that means learning to do your own demos. It means becoming more of an expert on your product. It means stopping over reliance on internal subject matter experts, solutions engineers, executive sponsors, CS team members. And it means it doesn't mean you don't use those people, but you don't punt to those people. Use them in a very targeted fashion.
So I'm going to take you down a direction, and we're going to run out of time in a minute.
Yeah.
So this is, I think, something I struggle with. So then you think, okay, so I've got to have every salesperson at 6 Sense be like an amazing consultant on B2B sales and marketing. More enablement. We need to enable another class, another whatever. And that creates a whole nother problem. Like there's only so much time in the day, and then they're stressed and they don't know. So like, how do you instill that in sales people?
It's a balance. So part of some of this might come.
Or is it a hiring profile?
That's what I was going to say.
People just kind of figure it out, or they try a couple times and bomb and get it right.
I think it is partly a hiring issue. I think it's a hiring problem, but it's also kind of an enablement and resourcing problem, which is if you're not hiring people who are intellectually curious about the problems that your solution solves in your customers and what life is like for them, and how do I guide them to the right decisions, and that's they're not getting up in the morning and saying like how do I get even farther down the learning curve about CMOs and B2B sales and marketing issues and how the 6 Sense platform plugs into what they care about and delivers value. That may have been a bad hire, right? The other thing though is that I think we inadvertently, because we don't believe salespeople could do that because they don't have enough time. They're never going to become the experts the product people are, the CS people are, folks like you.
We just spoon feed them too much.
I think that's part of the issue is that we equip them to bring a clown car of experts to every single sales call. And when you do that, well, why would I bother learning this stuff, right? Because I don't have to. Like
Well,
the
I used
whole,
to joke. So we used to compete against Accenture,
uh-huh.
and I used to say, well, how many people did they bring to the meeting? I'm like, that's how many millions of dollars your proposal is going to be, because they would bring they would back up
Yeah.
like a bus of
Yeah.
people. You know what I mean? To every meeting.
But you think about I mean, I talk about, it's so funny because you're hanging like, well, there's the enablement time and the cost and all this stuff. And that is true. But if it's like squeezing a balloon, like if you squeeze it here, it all goes over here, which is, think about in a world where there is no incentive and there's no support, no enablement for salespeople to develop expertise on their solution and on the customer's world and what it's like to live life in their shoes. If in that world, you better have a clown car of experts, because your salespeople will never do anything more than being glorified MCs on sales calls. So now let's talk about the last one, the T, because we will run out of time here. But the taking risk off the table, you asked about this. Remember that outcome uncertainty? Like, I'm worried I'm not going to get what I'm paying for. That ultimately I'm not going to achieve this ROI. There's two elements to this. The first one is setting proper expectations. Outcome uncertainty, the seeds of outcome uncertainty are planted very early in the sales process. And they're usually planted by overstating and holding up like amazing success stories and proof points, which are great. Like, we love those. It gets people to call us and want to engage with us. But if those are once in a lifetime, like not in a blue moon is that ever going to happen, what you find, actually, we looked at within certain companies.
I think if I that's what the problem with ROI calculators can be. I think
Yeah,
is
no,
they're
you're
too
100%
good,
right. You're 100% right.
right? And so one of the things that we coach to is like, you can give them the data, the stats. Like, we actually had one on the website,
Yeah.
and it was it was so good, it was not
It's so
believable.
gaudy, it's unbelievable, right?
Yeah,
But
and
average performers will anchor the customer on that. The customer will then go, they
we
have that
took
in their
it
mind.
down. We're like, you need to talk through it. You need to then reduce it with them. You can't,
Yeah.
like, you just are going to look like a joke otherwise.
You've got to under promise and over deliver in this. And what you'll find is like, we looked at, I won't mention the companies, but within certain companies, average performers would project ROI that was like 10x what high performers would project. High performers would acknowledge that ROI is possible, but they would counsel the customer to set their business case around much lower expectations and say, look, Ladney, I know we're going to deliver at least this, and everything beyond that is going to be an upside, and you're going to look like a hero. But what I don't want to have happen is something goes sideways, and then you're getting called into your boss's office to explain why we didn't get this crazy ROI, right?
So it's
so that's
being more conservative, like reminding
more,
them that you're being overly conservative and making sure that you're being overly conservative.
That's right. It's the old adage, under promise and over deliver, set proper expectations. Now, the second piece of dealing with outcome uncertainty and taking risk off the table is creating safety nets. Many salespeople will say, well, we can't give opt-out clauses. Like, we don't do that. That's for simple product businesses. And that's true. We don't see a lot of that in B2B, but that doesn't mean there's nothing you can do. There's a lot you can do. So think, for example, about a mutual value plan. So before the deal is closed, me saying to you, I know we're deals in legal procurement, we're going to get there for sure. Let's let that process run out. What I'd like to do, though, is start calibrating on our plan to deliver value to your organization, get value together. I want to show you a roadmap that this is built back, Lenny, from the customers who get the most value out of our platform, and also, frankly, the lessons learned from some customers where things didn't go so well. It's got metrics, it's got milestones, it's got owners, it's got stage gates. And if we follow this plan, we are going to get some great results. And so let's start just talking through it. Here's your recipe, right? Follow this recipe. Here are the ingredients. Other stuff like, here's another one that's interesting, especially for software-based businesses. Think about professional services. So this is pretty interesting. We found that high performers sold way more professional services than average performers. That probably on the face of it won't surprise you, but the way they positioned it was very interesting. They usually position professional services as an insurance policy. So I know you want to roll this out yourself. And the beautiful thing about our platform is you can do that. However, I think we would be smart to add a complement of professional services hours, because in the off chance that things start to slip, our A team can swarm the problem, get you back on track, and keep things humming. And look, if we don't use the hours, we'll roll them into the renewal or roll them over, what have you. And it's a great confidence giver for the customer. I mentioned before, starting small. The customer's eyes always get bigger than their stomachs. They want the all singing, all dancing, and saying, you know what? I'd love to sell you that $1 million deal, but I actually think the better thing for you is this $250,000 configuration. We'll structure the contract so we can expand from there quickly, but doing this is going to put a lot less pressure on you. It's going to give us a chance to learn together, experience some, hopefully lots of success, maybe some failure, learn from that, and then roll from there. I don't want you feeling undue pressure as a customer. And what we find is ultimately those high performers, by guiding the customer to buy less upfront, ultimately sell more over time.
Sell more, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. All right.
So that is your playbook.
That
is your playbook for overcoming indecision.
So let's summarize. Jolt. We're going to judge
the level of indecision. Yep.
Offer
your recommendation.
Limit decisions.
Limiting the exploration. So we don't want
exploration. That's right.
Yeah, we don't want our customers to engage in analysis paralysis. We need to ultimately what we're trying to do is get them to stop trying to be an expert on our platform and on this market. They never will be. They don't work at our company. We do.
And
they do this once in their career.
Has to come in. If you want to limit exploration, you have to have established yourself with the trust factor.
They have to trust you, and they've got to see you as an expert. And when you do that, you mentioned this before, can you say no? When you do those things, you earn the right to use a little bit of radical candor with your customer. For me to say to you, you know what? I don't think another demo is a good spend of your time. Let's talk about what's going on here. What are you trying to accomplish or learn that you didn't learn from the other 5 demos we did? And let's see if there's a better way to do that, because I want to be a good steward of your time. Only a person who's trusted and seen as an expert has a right to do that, right? But so you can do it, but you just can't do it without laying that groundwork.
Gotcha. And then last, take risk off the table.
Yep, exactly
things
right.
Things like starting small, things like professional services.
Yep.
Things
value
like
plans.
Value plans. Love it. Well, I took like 4 pages of notes. And
send me the bill for your carpal surgery. So
yeah, well, I gotta say, for those listening, the recipe is great, but I think a lot of implications for us to think about, hiring profiles, confidence building, just our own, back to the jelly jar. Do we have too many variables that are confusing? Pricing, there's a lot of implications to if you get under the hood of just the recipe.
That's right. That's right. And you hit on something here that's really important, which is, you remember in Challenger, we talked a lot about how Challenger is not just a salesperson's skill, it's an organizational capability. It requires marketing and enablement and the organization building those insights so that we can go challenge. Jolt's very similar. And we didn't talk a lot about this in the book, but it's something I'm out there in the market talking about is, what role does marketing and product and finance and pricing, what do they do to enable or create an environment in which it's easier for our salespeople to jolt customers into action?
Well, our audience is sales and marketing, so maybe we'll have to have you back and talk just about
Happy to do it.
All right. Matt Dixon, everybody. Amazing episode. I learned a ton. This is going to be our next playbook in B2B sales and marketing. So thanks for joining us, and we'll definitely get you back, Matt.
I'd love to be back, and thank you for having me.